Hey, what's going on, guys? It is Drew here. Today we are back for yet another Warhammer reaction. Today we're going to be checking out what is the best Warhammer 40k faction slash army to start out with. What's best to start off with, you know, for new players, which is me. I'm new, so perfect video for me, I guess. This might be the last one we watch though, guys, from Bricky at least. I might check out some other content creators or some other Warhammer videos, so please let me know in the comment section what else should I do. And by the way, if you commented on another video, please comment again on this one, because it's just a friendly reminder for me. I won't count it as spamming. If you want me to watch a video idea, just keep telling me. Unless I reply to your comment with no, then just keep telling me. I'll get it out eventually. I just need reminders. If you guys do like my Warhammer content though, please do make sure to like and subscribe. Check out Bricky as well. And without further ado, let's get into it.
Reports on my prior Warhammer video has been, to put it lightly, absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, the video was like 10 million views.
Well, maybe 3 to 4 years, and it's also a breath of fresh air to be able to make a video on something on a whim, on Warhammer, a while very popular game, not a game that I ever really made videos on, and to have it perform as well as it does. You know, YouTube,
and now that's kind of what he's known for.
Doesn't like change very much, so it is incredibly heartwarming. But with that, it also came with a question that was always being asked to me ever since making that video.
Right.
Hey Bricky, what army should I play? So for this, my next major Warhammer video, I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to go over all the different kinds of armies, just like we went with the main video, except instead of lore, we're going to be going through the different various ways of collecting the army, as in not only price-wise, but how many models you're going to need, how new.
Great thing to bring up, price, because when I was looking at them, some of them are pricey.
Of each army respectively. Are they melee? Are they shooting? Are they a little bit of both? Elite armies with only 20 models on the battlefield, or horde armies with 120 models on the battlefield? We're going to be discussing all of those, what each army is about, and give you at least a decent run through of every single faction to allow you to make the conscious and intelligent choice on which army you want to play if you want to get into the tabletop of Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah.
But first, before we start, I need to show you something. So I own an absolute boatload of wall art all across my house I've received from cons. And so when I was contacted by Displate to sponsor this video,
shout out Displate, but yeah.
What it is actually a partner to Games Workshop. Forge World makes these kind of custom.
Did he get 2 sponsorships?
The minis that aren't in the codexes specifically, however, you can use them and field them in your games. They're just generally expensive.
This sounds like Warhammer related.
They're a little more bizarre and sometimes like fan-made creations and such. But Forge World is like a side company of Games Workshop that makes 40k. I might mention them a few times. I wanted to go ahead and tell you about that. They're not used a ton, but they are something that you can use. Next, I want to tell you about hitting numbers. So if I ever say something like, oh, this army hits on 3s or 4s or 5s, what I'm saying is if they hit on 3s, that means if you roll a d6 and you throw it out there, if you get a 3, 4, 5, or 6, anything 3 or higher, then you hit your shot. You've landed onto your target. If I say they hit on 4s,
you mentioned this in another video.
5s, 5 and up, etc. And finally, we have things like stratagems. I'm going to mention those a few times.
Question, is there anything that lands on a 6? Because that would be like pretty tough. But I think how it works is if you land on a higher one, like, yeah, it might be pretty rare, but if you land, it's doing damage. So
stratagems are like special abilities you can use after having a pool of command points that you get for building your army, and you can kind of dole those out, these special abilities, stratagems, as you wish. You ever played Command and Conquer, Red Alert 3, or perhaps Kane's Wrath? My personal favorite was always Kane's Wrath.
I played none of those.
You know, little abilities on the side of the map? It's like those. Let's start off with the #1 best army you should collect for a new player: Space Marines.
I kind of knew it.
Before we get into how they play, I want to remind you all of the most important rule, the golden rule of collecting Warhammer. You will always have a better time with the army whose lore you like and design you prefer. Always buy the army
he's basically saying, don't take this to heart.
Undead Egyptian space robots that have enslaved gods as weapons,
then collect
buy the damn Necrons. I don't care if Necrons are S tier or F tier, buy the damn Necrons.
I respect that opinion.
If you love Viking aesthetic and you love Space Marines, get the damn Space Wolves. I don't care if they're S tier or F tier.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was going into this too, because I was like, yeah, I'm going to hear them out, but if I start buying this stuff, I really don't care what's the best thing. It's more like, what do I want? Because that's just how I am, but you know, I was gonna watch this and take everything with a grain of salt. You know,
Listen,
hear them out.
That you love the lore and the design of first. Nothing.
I don't mind Space Marines though, so maybe
a meta army that some people might not even want to play you against because you're going super power gamer and having to paint and create an army that you don't like. Play the army you think is the coolest.
Right.
Golden rule. Okay, Space Marines. So the poster boys of Warhammer are our first faction today, and I know when I said that the best army to collect, all the new players are like, oh god, not the Space Marines, the generic ones, and all the veteran players are going to say, oh god, not more Space Marine players I got to deal with.
I genuinely don't mind that, though.
Are already ready to hire a hitman to kill me. But I'm sorry, I know, I agree, Space Marines are, whew, right now, but they really are the best army. If you are a new player, Space Marines are your best bet. They are the best army to collect if you are a new player, and let me tell you why.
DraftKings withdrawal tracker lets
Let me tell you why. Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart, really, dude?
Space Marines got all the lore. They got a monopoly on lore.
Most lore in the game.
They easily have the most fleshed out backgrounds of any of the characters or factions in Warhammer. Space Marines have the most books. Space Marines are a huge part of the Horus Heresy.
That is a lot.
Just Space Marines will always have the most, and they have the most depth to them. Number two, Space Marines are very easy to paint, especially for new players.
Yeah, I thought that was weird.
You have a ton of variety of chapters, and they all have a ton variety of colors, and they're also pretty easy. Space Marines are also very large, or at least larger.
Pretty much looks like one color.
Canvas size is much bigger. Smooth armor, much easier to paint, especially their vehicles, and the paint schemes are easy. Ultramarines, blue. White Scar, white, Imperial Fist, yellow, Salamanders, green. It's extremely easy to paint Space Marines.
100%,
For a new
I see
player,
that.
I would highly recommend them for that specific part because the painting and building is a massive part of
You have
this
to build them too?
Number three, Marines are always getting new models. They are always getting equal attention from Games Workshop. Even if they have just been updated, they will get updated again and again and again. And the Harlequins and Dark Eldar players are crying in a corner, but we don't care about them because I got a new Primaris Lieutenant and he's got a skull shield. I don't know. They're always getting new models, and while it might be a little excessive at times, they will always be updated and your rules will always be changing, and therefore it keeps it very fresh if you're interested in playing them. Number four,
that's fair reason.
A vast amount of data sheets and units at your disposal. See, in a codex, you have a part after all the lore of it, after some of the keywords and art pieces and stuff, you have the data sheet section where it goes over all of your units and what they do and their stats and everything, their special rules and so on. And when you get to that spot, however many units an army has depends on, well, you know, how many pages of data sheets is it. Take the Adeptus Custodes. They have a very small amount of units, and their standard codex of data sheets is only 11 pages long. Sisters of Battle, however, a little more medium force. They have 19 pages of data sheets. The Imperial Guard, they have a much, much larger amount of data sheets because they're such a large army. They have 39
God, okay, I was already like, damn, at 11, 39
pages of data sheets.
That is kind of crazy.
56 pages of data sheets for different kinds of units. It's a little bloated at times because of the amount of characters and stuff, but still, they are all over the place.
Wouldn't that necessarily be a bad reason then?
And it is being even more updated
for new players to check out
as time goes on. Which brings me to number 5, and the most important of them all. Space Marines use every phase of the game. See, in Warhammer, there are phases in each turn. We're just getting into 9th edition, so we're getting something called the command phase soon, which is fine. But then we have the movement phase, psychic phase, shooting phase, the charge,
I get this. So essentially, you can use them for...
the last 3 are kind of all packed into one, if I'm being perfect.
I'm guessing essentially you can use all of them for every... You can use Space Marines in every single term. Every single term or phase, I guess. Because they do everything.
The main thing is that a lot of armies might utilize some of these phases a lot more often than expected. Grey Knights are very big in the psychic phase because they're all psychers, and so they really have a lot.
How does it work if some of them can't do a certain phase?
Psychers, and they won't even use that phase, but they've got really damn good shooting. However, they don't have any melee, so they're not going to be using the charge phase.
Wow.
Whereas, say, Slanesh Demons will use the charge and psychic phase plenty, but they won't be doing any shooting of like any kind, pretty much. The Marines, they will use every single phase, and you can't get good at the game and get good at the phases unless you're able to use all of them. And that's where Space Marines really shine. You can play them however you want in any kind of role. See, if you are running, let's say,
actually a really good
Iron
reason.
Hands or Imperial Fist army, these are both shooting-based armies. But you can still have good melee. Where if you wanted to play a more melee-based army like Space Wolves or Blood Angels, you'd still have good shooting units. You could still do plenty in the shooting phase. That's the most important part. Space Marines will use every single phase, and they are very, very good at it. So that is the main 5 reasons why you should be playing, or at least you should try collecting Space Marines. And I know I don't need
valid
more
reason.
Space Marines in tournaments, but it is the best decision.
I'm just guessing
Good to
everyone
paint,
uses
good
Space
to
Marines
collect,
by his
they're always
reacting.
getting updated. They got tons of units. They use every phase, and you can tailor them however you'd like.
Right.
Plus, and this is kind of down the line, but eventually after playing them enough, you might understand which army you'd want to collect second. If you start collecting a little bit of Space Marines, you start realizing, oh wow, I really think I'd prefer having more models on the table, or I wish I had tougher models. Then you can go for Tyranids or then Adeptus Custodians. It helps you figure out your second army a lot better. If you're a new player, you want to get interested in it, just do this. Go.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's because, like, hey, you get a little bit of everything with this, so yeah, essentially it might be the perfect one to start off with, because you get a little bit of everything, and it just leads you to other stuff, but it doesn't mean you have to.
Get yourself either, or check eBay.
Oh wow,
because
$15?
there's tons of offhand Marine stuff on eBay. Get yourself a pack of Intercessors or maybe a tactical squad. I'd say Intercessors because they're more modern, they're newer and more meta, and they're bigger for better paint canvases. Put them together with some glue, get some paint on them, try them out, and try getting into the game that way. I think it'd be a pretty smart.
I just wish they came painted, but I'm guessing that's part of the fun.
And Space Marines just really are one of the better choices right now. Okay, whew. Now that I'm done sucking as much Marine dick as your brain, let's move on to the rest of the armies. And my personal favorite army at the current moment, the Imperial Guard, or the Militare, is fucking the Imperial Guard. The Imperial Guard are my main army. They are what is known as a gunline horde army. Whereas Orcs and Tyranids have a horde army that has shooting, but it's more melee based, the Guard is going to be running 60 to 100 infantrymen, support walkers, artillery batteries, aircraft, drop troops, tanks, bigger tanks. The Guard is all about just blistering firepower. Now, however, the downside to this is that the Guard, while well-trained, are only 4-up well-trained. They hit on 4s, and they also do not have very good survivability. Guard stuff tends to be rather fragile. They very rarely have any special saves to keep them from taking any damage. Most of their stratagems aren't based around survivability, but in fact more firepower. Guard don't shoot amazing with their 4-up accuracy, but they make up for that with just sheer amounts of numbers of shots. I don't care if my tank hits
a lot
on
of
4s when I've got fucking 3 of them. If the Marines are like the pristine Swiss Army knife where they can do anything and they have a little tool for every situation, Guard are like a Swiss Army knife that's about 10 times as big and attached to a big wooden stick that you just beat the shit out of people with.
Damn.
Your units are squishy, they don't hit great, but you've got so many of them that you just take people out by drowning them in gunfire. As for collecting the Guard, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Their models are a bit older than I'd like. I personally think that they could use a decent amount of updates. They do get updated plenty rules-wise, but since they've got so many different kinds of units and so many Forge World options, a lot of them are a bit old and are showing their age. As for collecting them in the money side, they're pretty expensive.
Damn, so they're older and they cost more money? I guess that actually does make sense, because, you know, like, they're older.
You're going for a horde army, so you're going to have tons of...
Damn, but doesn't that kind of suck, because they're a good one to start off with, because they just, within pure numbers, they hit, but, like, they cost more money to collect.
Models on the playing field.
That kind of sucks.
That being said, I still do love them. I love their lore and their design. I love
By the way,
Guard, Swazi.
I want to know something, because if I am considering getting into this, I don't want to if it's going to cost me way too much money. How much have you guys spent on your entire collections? Comment down below and let me know. Like, I'm sure over time, obviously over time, I'm fine with spending money, but, like,
infantry.
damn, I'm curious, how much have y'all spent on your whole collection?
Greatest army as a main army. The Adeptus Mechanicus are the war cult of Mars. They are very weird, and I've been over how weird they are plenty before, but they're
weird, but they're
the
like
wackiest armies in the game, maybe along with Jeansteeler Colts. The Adeptus Mechanicus have a lot of
every time I see this image, he's played it so much time, it looks pretty damn cool to me.
Really weird back and forth styles when it comes to their gameplay. They're mainly a shooting army. I'd say they're about 75% shooting, 25% melee. However, they do have a couple dedicated melee units that can hurt pretty bad, but they're much lower on the tier list compared to the amount of gunfire.
Gotcha.
What's up, guys? This is Riley Leonard.
What's up, Riley Leonard?
Mechs or their own current bionics, but they do definitely have some of the wackier stuff. The entire army has a 6-up invulnerability save, so occasionally you get some pretty clutch moments when you start taking damage and you roll a couple dice and you get a couple 6s and you can shrug off like full-on missiles and stuff.
Damn.
So that is pretty cool. Like one of their base weapons is a really regular kind of crappy carbine, but if you roll a 6 for it, it does double damage, which can actually be ludicrously powerful at times. Then you've got the weird robots.
It's got some ups.
Robots that they're these giant like World War I mech dudes that have a refractor field, so if they block off shots with their reflector invulnerable save, it'll launch back damage towards the enemy, which can be kind of crazy. They're very strange. They definitely are quite strange. Much more shooting over melee and definitely fun. It has some great looking
I kind of like that.
Belisarius
It's like a wild card.
One of the best models in the entire game. Super cool looking too. A bitch to paint though. Oh my god. And that does lead me to the collecting of the AdMech part itself. They're actually getting a lot more newer updates lately. They're actually one of the newest armies as well. They came out only a couple years ago. All their stuff is in plastic and it looks really damn good. I personally think that they have some of the best aesthetics in the entire game. The only problem is that painting them is going to be a real bitch. I would recommend trying to do some of the simpler stuff, like maybe the Dune Crawler, before you get into things like Call.
Yeah, I'm really worried. I'm really worried about the painting because I suck at painting.
Really damn hard. Cost-wise, they are getting a bunch of new units, which is great. But generally, when you get new units, they are very expensive, and whenever new stuff comes out, it tends to be a bit expensive. The army isn't a horde, but it's also not an elite army, so they're probably in the mid-ground when it comes to price range. However, I would recommend them to people who like some kind of wacky antics and some weird abilities and weaponry, because
I could see this being
pretty
pretty
better
fun
and better as time goes on, and they're pretty dang cool to collect. So mid-tier price, maybe a little bit more expensive, but their scopes look great and they're very new, and I would highly recommend them. Next up, you've got the Adepta Sorora.
Sisters of Battle, really?
Sisters of Battle, my second favorite army, though I will be honest, they are really coming up to overtaking the Imperial Guard. I love my Guard, I love my Cadians, I love my Tempesta Scions, but the Sisters of Battle, they're really cool.
I'm kind of shocked by that.
Not only from a lore perspective, they're just insanely religious, zealotous nuns. That already is just really dang cool. As for the tabletop, they're one of the closest range armies in the entire game that isn't a full-on melee army. They're a slow-moving, like advancing gunline army with some actually horrifying melee units and just some like ridiculous close-range firepower. The Sisters are probably one of the top 3 hardest armies to play, I'd say. They've got some really weird antics as well, kind of like AdMech, maybe not quite as wacky. This army can be played in almost any way as well. You can do this a full gunline army or a full melee army, or 50-50. Everything is viable. They do require a lot of finesse and manipulation because these are all low toughness sisters that do have good armor, but when you've got a low toughness like they do, and they're not necessarily the most powerful when it comes to the actual punching, they can actually be shot off pretty quickly. So you need to be really smart on how you maneuver them because you've got a super short range, kind of squishy army at times. That can be a little bit challenging to get through. That being said, people are sleeping on the power of Sisters.
I don't know if I would be too interested in collecting them, because when I heard about the lore, like from all the other videos I watched, I guess I don't know everything. They weren't that interesting to me. He said it's his favorite though. It's about to pass his favorite, become his new favorite. And this video was some years ago, I think. So maybe it is his favorite at this point. So maybe I need a second think that, like, I don't
Let me
know.
be the first one to say it. You are all sleeping on how strong this army is. This army, if
Maybe I
played
am.
well by a
Maybe I
smart
am.
person, will crush you. As for the actual collecting of the models, Sisters
Interesting.
are the most recent army, at least as the time of making this video,
Oh, wow.
who've had a complete army overhaul. For a while, there were no plastic sister models whatsoever, but the entire army, besides I think one unit,
got remade.
a full overhaul of
That's
models.
dope. That's dope.
Everything is brand spanking new, and they probably have the best looking models in the entire game, in my opinion. They
do look pretty
incredible.
cool.
That crazy gothic, kind of Catholic nun look. I mean, come on, their tank is a pipe organ missile launcher. It's a pipe
I remember
organ
that.
missile
Okay, that's
launcher.
pretty funny.
Sisters are one of the coolest looking armies in the entire game. They are a bit expensive.
By the way, do you have to just paint the characters, or do you have to paint stuff like this too?
That's the one downside, is that because
Expensive.
this entire army is brand new, it's brand new with a brand new price tag. So I personally love them. They might soon become my favorite army. I can't quite tell yet. They look great. They're a little expensive to collect. They have lots of different kinds of abilities, both
Gotta have a
melee and
downside,
shooting. No
right?
psychic phase, but they do have some shenanigans to stop other people from using the psychic phase. They're pretty cool, but they are really hard to play, and they take a lot of practice. So kind of up to you. I would say not a very good starting army,
Yeah,
but they are pretty neat. All right,
I was
Grey
just about to say that. I kind of feel like you put that on the list. Like, okay, if he was doing like best overall, I could see him putting it on there. But best to start, I kind of feel like he included it because it's his favorite.
Knights. I heard you like the psychic.
Not calling him out or anything, like, because, you know, that's some type of stuff I would do as well. Like, you know, I'm going to put my favorite on the list as well. But yeah, I kind of see his point there. Like, it's probably not the best to start with.
Psychic phase. If you
From
like
the
the
looks of it.
psychic phase, this is the psychic phase for you. Grey Knights are Space Marines X2. They're super mega duper elite Space Marines that are all psychers. They're nuts. Grey Knights are insane. They are very, very elite. However, you have probably like maybe 40% fewer models than an average army will have. All of your dudes, however, are scary in their own right. They all hit very well on 3s minimum. They all have great armor. Since they're all psychers, they're really good at dealing with other psychers. They also have great shooting and
3 is
very
actually pretty good.
strong melee. All of your guys have extremely powerful melee weapons. The only downside of Grey Knights is that any anti-psycho shenanigans can really harm them, and you are running an elite army with
I actually
very
like
few
how their
models. When you
tabletops
run
look.
very few models, that means every time you're rolling and you roll those ones, it hurts that much more.
Really?
Granted, so they have this awesome kind of old school knight round table aesthetic with them all carrying things like halberds and falchions. They've got holy text and they
I
carry
like
books
it.
around and flags. But they do get to use every phase as well. Lots of psychic, and then
Oh,
they're
they do every
shooting and a
phase.
ton of melee
Oh.
as well. Mainly psychic and melee. In terms of buying them,
Every
they're not
phase as
too
well.
bad
That's pretty
actually.
good.
They're probably one of the cheaper armies as well, because when you're
That's
running
good.
an elite army, not as many models on the tabletop, so it's a lot easier to fill out your entire army by only purchasing
Gotcha. So there's
many,
not as
or
many
fewer
of them.
boxes than normal. As for their scopes, I don't know exactly how new they are. I wouldn't call them very new. I call them like middle ground when it comes to how old they are. They're not super old, but they're not necessarily super new either. That being said, if they are, say, medium old or whatever, they do look great. I love the way the plastic models look. I think they look fantastic, and I would recommend trying them out if you like a psycho-heavy Space Marine thing. You play Space Marines and you're like, wow, I like the psychic phase. Grey Knights. No competition.
So do older models
Infantry
stop
is for
being used in the
losers. It's
game?
Big mech boy
Or can you
time.
use old models and
And
new
I'm being
models?
honest though, the Imperial Knights,
Like mix and match.
I wouldn't recommend them. I'm just going to come out and say it. I don't
Damn.
think Imperial Knights are a very good army for a new player. They are one of the cheapest armies.
Why include
you
them in the
can
vid
buy,
then?
Because while
cheap.
each knight in its own
Cheap.
right is very expensive, you only need 3 or 4 to fill out an entire game's worth.
Gotcha.
And compared that to a full army, they're actually not too bad.
Could be expensive.
price-wise. The problem with Knights is that, as cool as they are, they want to use the psychic phase. They have plenty of shooting, though. Plenty of shooting.
Plenty.
And they
I
have
can
some
tell.
really great melee. But when you're playing Imperial Knights, you're not really playing 40K. A great friend of mine said, if you're playing
do you
Imperial Knights, you're playing chess. But you have
Nah.
about 6 queens. against a normal enemy chess player. If the enemy chess player is smart, they could easily beat your 6 queens. I'm sure it'll be pretty simple for them to use their full arsenal to beat you. But if the enemy chess player is a noob, for instance, then there's a good chance that they're not going to be able to win, and you'll just
So
kinda
essentially,
noob stomp them. And that's
you
what
can only
knights
beat
are.
noobs.
Knights are generally noob stompers, or more like just a middle tier army. They're
Well, that's
not
kinda
good for new
lame.
players because they don't really teach you the game, and it's not the way the game is really
Meant to be played?
meant to be played,
Yeah.
so to speak. I got nothing against knight players. If you're a knight player,
Like,
it's
it's not
totally
how it's
fine.
meant to
If
be
you
played,
run a
but they're
Knight
in it,
Valiant,
so
you have
fair.
nothing but my respect. All right, get that Knight Valiant, 2-up armor, 4-up invul, Trader's Pyre. Oh, wait, you can't have both. Just have Trader's Pyre, the coolest weapon in the game.
Okay,
all
buddy.
right. But honestly, just for a new player, I would not recommend knights. They are cool. They're great painting projects. However, if you just want to paint something, definitely pick up a knight for that. They look great. You're not really playing 40K when you play Imperial Knights. You're playing a kind of a weird hybrid of it. If anything, get a normal army like say Imperial Guard or maybe some Space Marines, and then buy one big knight and throw it into your army as an ally. That would be the way to do it, I'd say. I think they're better as a supplementary character as opposed to a main army or force. This is also same for Chaos Knights as well. They do look really cool though. They do look really cool. Golden boys, golden boys. Adeptus Custodians are the elite of the elite. This is probably one of the most elite armies you could possibly play. These guys are nuts. They hit on 2s or higher in shooting and
that's the lowest
melee.
we've seen so far.
They have triple the health of a normal Space Marine. They have a better armor save than a normal Space Marine. They all have invulnerable refractor fields around them.
These
which
guys are
most
so far the
armies
ones
do not
I'm most
have.
interested
They're
in.
tougher than Marines. They get
But
to reroll 1s in the shooting and melee
I'm
phase
guessing
when
they're
a
really
certain
OP.
captain is near them, which
that'd be
means they're
annoying for other
hitting on
people, right?
2s, rerolling 1s. You absolutely murder people
Wow.
in melee. You've got some okay shooting. Your shooting is hit or miss, but your melee is insane, and you use about 20 models. They are literally the definition of Chad Thundercock, okay? Chad Thundercock, if
I could see that being pretty expensive though. If I had to buy 20 separate
if
characters.
that was a human being, it would be a custodian.
I don't know, man.
Okay, the problem is that you only have 15, 20, 25 models in your entire army.
Oh,
it is
only?
absolutely crazy how powerful these guys are, but they do.
That's lower,
pay the
apparently.
price for it.
God
That being
damn.
said, when it comes to collecting them, they are one of the cheapest armies you can
Whoa.
buy. Because they're so elite, you don't need as many things to purchase. You don't need as
Okay, maybe I might check them out first.
many models to have on the field. So
Golden
buying
boys.
custodians is much cheaper than your average army. It's an elite army,
Might have
and
to.
also they're much easier to paint, in my opinion, because they're so big.
This
They're
might be the best
2
for me
feet
then.
Taller than a Space Marine, lots of
Cheap
big
and easy to
canvas
paint.
for your painting,
And they look cool.
they're almost all gold. Gold isn't that hard to paint, I wouldn't say. So they're good for
Facts.
painting. They're not very expensive. I would say they're not bad at beginner army, if I'm being honest. They're pretty cool. They have a nice kind of power fantasy to them. But as an elite army, every one you roll is gonna really hurt. So that's something you should be worried about. Or warned about, at least.
Okay.
They're pretty neat, though. I'm not going to touch on the Assassins, Sisters of Silence, or Inquisition too much
there
because
is,
they're
in
not
fact,
really
the downside.
an actual army. The Assassins are really damn cool. There's 4 of them, and you get to pick one to add to your army as you see fit. They all have different things they do and specialize in. A sniper, a horde clear, a kind of confusion specialist, and an anti-psyker character. Cool, their scopes are really nice, and since they're only single characters, not too expensive, but you really can't make an army out of them. They're more of a supplementary character. The Sisters of Silence just recently got an update to
As far as assassins go, I feel like I would collect them just to collect them. Like, I don't know if that sounds crazy. Is that a thing when it comes to Warhammer? Just having characters to have them? You don't play all of them, but you just have some because they're cool. That's probably as far as I would go with assassins because they are really cool to me. Like, I like the assassins. I just don't know if I would play them. Are they good? He kind of just brushed by them, so yeah. And I don't. Maybe. I mean, these people kind of look a little basic to me, but the assassins are so different, and like hearing their backstories and what they do is really cool. So I would like just have those to have those type of thing.
With custodians, which is
Maybe.
awesome and super cool. And
That's how I
is
feel
actually
anyways.
kind of a big part of them because the
I don't know if
Sisters of
that's a
Silence
thing,
are
though.
a big anti-psyker, but they only have maybe 2 kits. 3 kits in their entire army, and that's about it. They're not really worth collecting in their own right unless you're already collecting custodians. And the Inquisition are a whole bunch of just little characters, basically. A whole bunch of named characters with cool abilities, which are neat, but not really something that I would try to get a whole bunch of. Look at
Right.
all three of those things after you're already starting collecting another army.
Okay.
You're like, hey, I kind of want an assassin. Throw an assassin in there.
Fair.
Unless you're playing
That's fair.
Custodians, then check out the Sisters of Silence, because the Custodian's biggest weakness is Psychic, and the Sisters do a great job at cutting that down. All right, let's move on to Chaos. So we got the Chaos Demons to start off with. Chaos Demons follow one of 4 gods: Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, or Slaanesh Big Titty. With Slaanesh Big Titty, you're going for melee and fast. You are all melee, you've got no shooting, you got good psychic spells, but you're running in there at Mach 5. Papa Nurgle is slow but tanky as hell. Tzeentch,
Nurgle is a
little bit
demon,
in
dog.
between, but tons of psychic spells. Khorne, no psychic. Melee hits like a truck. Pretty much
Facts.
all of the Chaos Demon factions are glass cannons and very heavy into melee. You got some good psychers for a lot, about 3 of the 4, because Khorne I don't think has any. So there is still plenty of variety in there.
Is it bad that I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm hearing what he's saying, but damn, these look cool.
But
these
what
just
you're doing
look
is you got a
pretty
whole
cool.
bunch of big glass cannon demons that run up and just break your face.
Right.
That's Chaos Demons in a nutshell. They all have their various traits. Sledge is fast and hits a lot of times. Nurgle is tanky. Tzeentch is psyker. Khorne hits really hard. Pretty simple in that sense. But overall, Chaos Demons, to collect them, they're not something you would really collect by themselves. You would ally them in with things like Chaos
Well, you
Space
can
Marines,
actually get,
which
like,
we're going to be talking about in
you
just
can
a
actually
moment.
get the
But
gods.
as an army in their own right, don't try
That
to make
is
a
cool.
demon army. I wouldn't say. They don't teach you a ton of the game, and they're a little bit limited because you have to stick with one Chaos faction normally. If you want to ally in multiple things, you're probably going to need some Chaos Space Marines to go along with it. And with that, let's talk about
I was just about to ask that.
Chaos
Could you use
Space
like
Marines,
different?
you're kind of getting the butt
different
end
things.
of Games Workshop. They don't really seem to like you, Chaos,
different
that much.
factions.
I don't know why. A lot of your models aren't very new, and a lot of them are expensive, and your rules aren't that great most of the time, with the exception of something that happened in 7th edition with Chaos Demons, apparently. I heard it was a very, very strong codex. Chaos Space Marines are very similar to regular Space Marines, but they're much more focused on melee combats. You still have shooting, and it depends on which faction you're going through as well. But
To be
while
fair,
you do
like,
have your
what do you guys like
shooting
more,
units, it is
shooting or
generally
melee?
more melee
I
based,
like
I'd
melee
say.
more. Like,
Demons in their own right and
sounds more
Chaos
fun.
in their own right want to run in there and start breaking face. That's generally their MO. As
Right.
for Chaos Space Marines, it depends on what legion you're joining, but overall there are a ton of different ways for you to go ahead and get about completing your objective. The Death Guard and the Thousand Sons, I believe, are the most fleshed out. They both have their own codexes. They both have their own special units, especially Death Guard. Death Guard is very recent, and both of them allow you to field a Primarch, which might be one of the coolest parts about them. You can run Mortarion or Magnus the Red, both gigantic, beautiful models that are just awesome showpieces to have. They get shot.
Honestly,
a
I
lot,
was just
but
in awe
they're-
there. I went
once they get
silent.
into
I was like,
combat, oh man, do they cause problems.
Wow.
As stated before, you should be building what you'd like, of
Right.
course. What you enjoy is the most important part of it. But as for
100%,
Chaos,
100%.
it's really, you gotta like melee combat, and you gotta like different kinds of allying problems.
oh man, we had so long without an ad. We had so long.
Chaos in general isn't a great faction to start off with as a new player, because you need to understand the intricacies of how to do army building and knowing what you're running a little bit more prevalently.
Right.
And so I'd wait on doing anything Chaos related, at least
God
until you get a
damn,
solid
that is a
update,
cool figure
or
right there.
someone teaches you, or you get a little more into the hobby. With the exception of Death Guard. I think Death Guard is in a good place for a new player, because
Okay.
Death Guard is pretty cool. But
Fair,
besides
fair.
that, they're a little tough.
Little
Okay,
iffy.
let's talk about some Xenos.
Eldar.
Starting off with the Space Elves, the Eldar. So the Eldar are definitely a
I don't know if I was
more
expecting that.
glass cannon-y kind of style group. They are the first Xenos race we're talking about, and there are a couple versions. There's also the Drukhari and the Harlequins.
Oh, yeah, facts.
However, the Eldar, they are strike hard, strike fast, and get out of there immediately. So the thing about Eldars, what would happen is they would fly out of somewhere, immediately gun down with extremely high power weaponry,
Damn.
hitting on threes with some kind of BS stratagems, if I'm being honest, and then they can zip back
Right.
into cover and really annoy you. Honestly, Eldar probably have some of the more powerful shenanigans when it comes to the game. They have lots of weird rules. Their stuff hits extremely hard, but of course, once you fire back at them, if you live, they will crumble under a slight breeze to an extent. If you play Eldar, you won't be making a bunch of friends, if I'm being honest. I'd say Eldar are top 3 most aggravating enemies to fight against.
Really?
People don't like fighting Eldar a whole lot. Myself included, I find them to be quite aggravating. But if you're that kind of person who likes zip in, zip out, and be all kind of trickery,
that usually means they're good, though.
They're definitely the army for you. They're definitely
what
more
that usually
shooting and
means.
psychic based. That's the 2 main things. They've got some good melee, but mainly shooting and psychic based. As for collecting Craft World Eldar, I'd say that they got some good sculpts. Some of their models look pretty good. They got some nice plastic. A few of it's a little bit older, but you don't need a huge army. So when it comes to the money side of it, not too bad. I'd say the financials for it are pretty dang solid, and I wouldn't call them an expensive army to collect, at least not from my knowledge. The Dark Eldar, or the Drukhari,
honestly,
are
I
like
want
Eldar
Bricky to do like a
cranked up to
collection
12.
video.
They're
Has
faster,
he done that?
they can hit
I would
harder
watch
at
that.
some points, and they have really good melee units. Their melee units can actually
I'm gonna
be
see what he
really
has.
scary, but they are also doubly made of paper. They're also a lot harder to play. They're probably top 3 hardest armies to play, along with the Sisters of Battle.
Really?
And that actually goes on to the Harlequins as well. Harlequins are an army that just don't collect Harlequins, if I'm being honest. They're not a great choice. They have barely any models, and they're really weird, and they have a lot of shenanigans if you want to pull them off. If you're a new player, I would not recommend Harlequins at
Fair enough,
Dark Eldar, Eldar, and Harlequins, speedy, made of paper, hit like absolute trucks, and not too expensive, I wouldn't say. Drukhari, I think, is a little bit more expensive than the other 2, but not too pricey because you don't field a ton of units in your armies. Moving on, we got Tyranids, bugs.
Tyranids.
You got bugs,
I don't know.
bugs.
I don't know about this for
so
me.
many bugs. Now, Tyranids obviously are a horde army. It should be very obvious. They are also a melee horde army.
Yeah.
Whoa, I know, call the presses. You are mainly spending your time in the melee phase as well as some of the psychic phase. You got a lot of good psychic.
Yeah, I just don't see me. I just don't see me getting into this one.
Involved and advanced bugs, and
because
your
they just have
melee
like
phase
not too much
is,
lore.
as it seems. You have really gigantic, gargantuan creatures.
But maybe they're fun to
that
play.
Eat everything alive, or you've got 40,000 little boys that eat everything alive.
Right.
You do actually have some somewhat good shooting too with your Exocrine and your Hive Guard. You can put out some pretty decent shots. They are definitely the kind of army you run if you want big swaths of just these angry little running bug dudes that just swarm on your enemy. It's literally called the Tyranid Swarm. As for price-wise though, I'd say they're actually very, very expensive to collect.
Wow.
Their sculpts are... Some are a little bit older, but not all.
Wouldn't you technically need a lot of them because they swarm you though?
Date release for their sculpts, I'd say they are a bit older, though they are expensive. They're expensive and you're like a horde army, so that's definitely one of the top more expensive armies to collect because.
I'm good.
Come on,
I'm
tons
good.
of bugs, tons of models. And
join the Patreon in the description
if you
want.
Sculpts. Can be a little bit of a challenge. Jeansteeler Colts. You want to play bugs,
God
but you
damn,
want to play
I want
human
these so bad,
bugs
but
with scrotum heads.
money's tight.
Jeansteeler Colts are a very new addition.
Not those
very
specifically,
new.
but
And they run
I do want to start collecting
almost
shit.
as weird as AdMech style army. They're very fast, they hit really hard, and they like dip underground, they crawl from underground, they hit you with very powerful short-range weaponry and super strong melee attack, and then they kind of run away and they like zip, hit and run tactics. That's probably the best way to do it. Hit and run tactics, they come out of the ground, they spook you, they do a bunch of damage, they run away, they got some weird psychic spells here and there, they run these like makeshift Mad Max trucks and stuff. They definitely have a unique play style. They deploy strangely, they like to zip around the place kind of strangely, and they definitely
sounds like they're
one of
strange.
the more unique armies there are. Would I recommend collecting them? No. They kind of fulfill a niche, but they're not that like overarchingly special, I'd say. I don't know what the word is exactly, but they are a very specific play style for a very specific player. So if you're running Tyranids, you might consider doing Jeansteeler Colts, but at that point, you already kind of know what you're doing, so I don't think I recommend this to a new player. Jeansteeler Colts and Tyranids both a little bit rough to recommend to a new person because they are very expensive, both of them. And while the models for Jeansteeler Colts are definitely a lot newer and that's much nicer, they need practice. They are definitely a harder army, and I would recommend waiting on those if you're a new player.
Understood.
Orcs.
I was wondering when they would be here. Why are they so
Orcs.
low?
I would say Orcs are great if you like the Horde army and you like having RNG dictate your life. So Orcs hit on 5s, as I mentioned in my last video.
Okay,
However,
I can
if
see
you
why.
roll 6, you get to make another attack with the weapon. Everything from the little pistol to the giant rocket launcher. You can have a rocket launcher that fires 3
Yeah, I forgot about that. Like, yeah, it's tough, tough.
And if you
But
get lucky enough, you can
hit,
fire 5 times. But the main thing that you're probably going to be jumping with Orcs for is the giant green tide, because their melee ability is pretty humongous. They have very weird gunfire. They got their weird weapons and their strange rules, the Daka rules to allow them to get all these extra shots. And they can even have some pretty dang good shooting with things like shock attack guns and Daka jets and stuff. If Orcs hit on 5s and shooting, they hit on like 3s in melee. Orcs love to beat the hell out of each other. So it's very obvious that once they get into melee, they'll just start pounding on you because they are really good at hitting stuff. In fact, I might be speaking a little bit too hyperbolically when I say RNG controls your life with Orcs. Or RNG controls your shooting, but your melee is actually pretty dang good. They've got a special ability called Here We Go, which allows them to re-roll their charge dice, which is a very rare thing and extremely powerful buff. Getting into melee has never been easier if you're an Orc. As for collecting Orcs, expensive. Probably the most expensive Horde army there is. Probably more expensive than Tyranids or Guard or anything in between. They have scopes that are sometimes new, sometimes very old. You can have cool new models like Gazgul Thraka, but then you got a whole bunch of really damn old Orc models because Orcs have been around forever. Their codex in their own right is pretty neat, and there's some pretty good models in there, but Orcs they're showing their age, and you need a shitload of them. And they are very expensive for that reason. So they're expensive to collect, and you need a ton to collect a good-sized army. But playing them, if you like melee with some really fun shenanigans,
they do seem kind of fun.
I can see why someone would like Orcs, because they're Orcs. Come on, they're great.
They seem kind of fun to me.
Necrons. So the Necrons, if I had to pick a Xenos army, I'd play Necrons, honestly.
Okay.
Necrons, I mean, they're just so cool.
Hey,
Undead,
they are pretty cool.
Egyptian skeleton robots that carry enslaved gods
exactly.
into battle.
You can't say that out loud and think it's not cool.
Fittingly named, well, about necromancy, but not like the undead homina. Necromancy through metal. So the way Necrons are is that they are kind of a slow-moving, at least some of their units slow-moving, gun line with some mixed-in melee units. Not all their army is melee, but their melee units that they have are actually like really scary. But for a while, Necrons are kind of slow-moving Terminator-style guys. They just blast you away at a distance with some very powerful weaponry. They kind of have Space Marine stat lines, actually. They run about as many models as Space Marines. They got similar stat lines and similar weaponry. I say that they're actually quite similar to Space Marines in the terms of how they play. But they actually do have a lot of weird shenanigans that make Necrons their own. For instance, the main thing that you might want to pick Necrons for is their reanimation protocols. Special ability that, let's say you got 10 units of your base Necron unit, warriors, for instance.
Reanimation is like back to life,
warriors,
right?
Your basic troop choice. Your opponent kills like, let's say 7. Kills 7 of them, you got 3 of them left. Their turn ends, your turn starts. You then roll a dice for every dead model. So 7 models, 7 dice. And for every 5 or higher, you automatically get one of your models
that is
to
pretty
stand
cool.
right back up. Your Necron just goes like your vehicles regenerate health as time goes on. You have special abilities to maybe
some of these
make your
pieces
Necrons
are just
come
so
back
nice,
on
dude.
a 4 up instead of a 5. You can re-roll your 1s for it. It's all about getting your units to come back up and being like, if you're fighting Necrons, you better kill it. Because if you leave it wounded, it's going to repair itself, and that's not a very good thing. That's the idea of Necrons. They got good shooting, they got good melee, and honestly, now is a good time to be a Necron player. They are getting a massive update right now. This is right before 9th when this video is coming out, and they are getting huge new model ranges, a ton of just new units in general, massive updates, rule updates. Necrons are getting big additions, and I think it's going to be super.
So, question for the comments. I don't know, I don't know how many people are still watching because we're really late into the video. Thank you if you have watched this far. As far as it goes, like for the stuff that they're like on, like the whole background and the scenery, does Warhammer sell that as well, or do you kind of make that on your own? Do you know what I mean? Like not the figures, not these things that they have, not the ships. I'm talking about like, you see how the rocky background, you know, like what the things are laying on. Do people just make those, or are those sold as well?
Great.
Just
now
wondering.
It's a good time to be a Necron player. The new stuff might be a little expensive to collect because it is new stuff. That being said, they're not an elite army, but I guess they can be played elite army if they wanted to. But they don't have a few models. They don't have too many models. They're nice in between.
Gotcha.
And now is a damn good time for it. Last but not least, we have the Tau
Empire.
Fruity fun Fruit Loops. Great
Loops. Tau is like the basic ones, right?
Who want to gun their opponent down with the most sci-fi, hardcore Gundam giant mech stuff you can think of.
I think you said like Tau feel like they're not really in the game either, though, right? Feel out of place.
Through just the unrelenting volley of railgun shots and rail rifles and fusion blasters. You will look up and you will see missiles.
This one's not for me because I like the melee aspect more. That just sounds like way cooler attacks and stuff.
Army because the Tau player's got
but I can see people liking this for sure.
All of his characters. He's got flying drones to fire laser sights to mark them, to have better accuracy, to block shots, and your big battle suit will be rolling up and then a drone will come in and block a missile from it. The Tau are definitely more of an Eastern inspired, definitely a Gundam kind of look to them. And they are just ludicrously powerful in shooting phase. And they also have tons of special abilities to stop your opponent from getting to you in the charge phase. The Tau has no melee. Their melee is straight garbage. When a Tau infantry start punching, it means they've lost. And you might think to yourself, wow, Bricky, this sounds great and aggravating.
That's funny.
That's about right. The Tau get a lot of shit. Some of it warranted, some of it not so warranted. The models in their own right definitely don't fit very well with 40K. They're much more of a sci-fi Gundam style thing compared to a gothic, grimdark sci-fi fantasy. However, I do think they do look pretty cool in their own right. It's just kind of weird in this universe. But when you've got an entire army whose whole job is to blast you away from incredible ranges across the map, and every time you even try to retaliate,
look cool, just not my style.
Gun you down when you try to charge, or they block your shots with drones. It can be pretty aggravating. That being said, there are really cool new ways to play Tau, like close range attacks with Cold Star battle suits in the Farside Enclaves, which, by the way, if you ever use a Cold Star battle suit, or a Cold Star commander, I suppose, or a Yavara, you have my respect. So you do have different options when it comes to Tau instead of just sit back and fire. But you definitely don't got much melee. You definitely don't got much melee. You suck at melee. But if you just want to gun people down and the only phase you care about is the shooting phase, you don't care about psyche, you don't care about melee, you just want to blast people, Tau is definitely for you. As it comes for collecting them, their scopes are pretty good. They're not entirely super new, but they do look great. They have a whole bunch of different kinds of mechs, big and small. They got drones, big and small.
They look cool. I just don't know if shooting's my style. I'll have to play to find out, honestly.
They look nice. They're also, I'd say, not too expensive. You don't need a ton of them, and the battle suits themselves are expensive for each box. But you just only need so many.
You just don't need a lot.
Because they are very expensive when it comes to the points cost in the game.
Right.
So Tower on the middle level of the expensive tier. Whew, that was a lot of talking right there. That covers it though. That is every army in 40.
Thank you, Bricky, for another video, another amazing video. Guys, please subscribe to Bricky if you haven't, because, he does all the work. I sit here and I watch. So, hey, if you guys are Warhammer fans, hey, please do make sure to like and subscribe. I do intend on doing more content. I just don't know if I'm going to do any more from Bricky. I'm not saying I don't like his videos. I absolutely love them. They've been fantastic to watch. I just don't think that there's many more to check out. That's my only problem. I just don't think there's that much more. But let me know if he's done like a video like showing off all of his stuff, because I would love to watch that. I would love to react to that. Maybe that's something we could do. I don't know if he's ever done it though. But if there is more Warhammer videos that you guys really want me to watch from Bricky, let me know. But I was looking for some and I was like, there's not really too many more like that are, lengthy or like, too interesting to me. But maybe there's one that I really need to check out. If so, let me know. And any other ideas, comment down below. Like and subscribe. Check out the Patreon down below. That will support me with getting these figurines. And I want to give you Warhammer fans some content on the Patreon. So yeah, maybe I'll let you guys get reactions early on the lowest tier. Obviously, I'm not just gonna drop some reactions early and make you guys pay a lot of money. Maybe I'll just put those on the lightest tier. So if you want to support the Patreon, because that's just gonna help me buy some of these you know, some of these things to get started on my journey in this. And I do intend on making videos on it whenever I get some of these, or maybe like in the reaction video, I'll unbox them for you and all that good stuff, and just, you know, started that up. I'm pretty interested. So hey, shout out Bricky, got me into something new. But yeah, see you guys in the next video. Comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.